phone screen. Okay. Say hi, Lily.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, I'm Jody Hand, Mrs. Hand Painted, and in today's video, I'll be showing you how we can do some practice drills in watercolor. In today's video, we'll be doing some practice drills of roses, and we'll be trying out some different brushes. So maybe you have several different brushes that you want to practice with. In today's video, I'll be using 4 of my different brushes that I have that I'm going to try and do roses with. Yes, thank you. You want to hold those? Thank you. So follow along with me, and practice makes progress. So let's try and perfect our roses. So the 4 brushes that I have in my collection that I'll be using in today's video is a Silver Brush Company Black Velvet round size 10. I have a Princeton Velvetouch round size 10, a Silver Silk 88 from the Silver Brush Company. This is a 1/4 inch dagger brush, and a Princeton Neptune round 6. I did order some bigger ones of these, as I would typically like to use a larger brush, but this is what I had. And I'm using the dagger brush based off of a class I took on Skillshare by Jolly Poa, and she was making different loose flowers with the dagger brush, so I'm trying that out to see how that works. So use whatever brushes you have in your collection and find out which one that you like to use the best for using for painting loose florals. So this is a great way to just try out some of your different brushes and see what works best for you.
All right, so like I said, I'm going to be doing some practicing of my loose roses. This was a sheet that I was trying out earlier with just my black velvet brush. The brushes I'm going to be using, again, I did my intro there. The first one is that black velvet round size 10. I've got the Princeton Velvetouch round 10 as well. And then I have a Princeton Neptune round 6. And typically I would like to use a larger brush to do my roses with, but I haven't received the brushes I ordered yet. So that Neptune brush I've had for several years. So it's a little bit, one of the first brushes I ever bought actually. And then that last one is the Silver Brush Company. It is their Silver Silk 88 line, and it is the 1/4 inch dagger. And I have a piece of Fabriano paper. This is the Artistico by Fabriano, and it's a sheet that it was a large sheet that I cut down to size 8 by 10. And I'm just going to make 4 columns and just mark that off with a pencil. If you're doing an 8 by 10 sheet, you can, depending on how many brushes you're going to try out, just give yourself at least 2 inches, 2.5 to make roses in a row, and give yourself some room to practice them. So I'm just going to draw that out really quick, and we'll come right back. And I just went ahead and marked those off really quickly with a pen just so that I could remember which row was which brush. So I'm going to start off with my silver brush. This is the Black Velvet round 10. This is a natural hair brush, and it's very, very soft, but it has a really, really fine point. I'm just going to use one of my favorite colors here. This is the Quinacridone Violet, or Quinacridone Purple, excuse me. Just use whatever paint you have and whatever color you like. This is just for practice, so you could make these rainbow colored if you wanted to, or any color at all. So I'm just doing this for practice purposes. It doesn't need to be any kind of fancy color. So I'm starting out very, very finely in the center here and making some C strokes around. And I'm just applying pressure as I go around to get that thicker portion, and then adding some thin pieces around. So I went a little fast on that. So for this next one here, I'll slow my video down to half speed. So I'm just using very light pressure to get those thin strokes in the center, making those C shapes going around. To get the thicker sections, I'm just going to apply more pressure to my brush and press down and going in that C curve shape. And this is something you just got to keep practicing, and that's why we're doing these drills, so we can learn about controlling our brush, getting the right pressure, and practice making those strokes. So just going in C-shaped strokes around, and I don't want them to be parallel or in line with each other. So when I make 2 strokes, the next layer is going to intersect or go across the intersection of those so that you don't have your two strokes have the same seams, I guess. And I'm just going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to do a couple more of these with this brush, and then my next column I'll move on to my next brush, which is the Princeton Velvetouch round 10. So this is just some nice practice drills to try. Like I said in my intro, just use whatever brushes that you have, and this is a nice way to figure out what brushes you feel the most comfortable with making loose flowers. So different types of flowers, I like to use different brushes. So I'm not using just one brush many times when I'm painting. All right, so like I said, I'm going to move on. I'm going to use my Princeton Velvetouch round 10 for my second column here, and just going to use the same color and just continue on in the same fashion, making those really fine strokes in the center, and then going around in my C shapes, making sure that my seams are overlapped and varying up the thickness. Um, Thin and thick strokes throughout the rows. And like I said, it's just practice here. So maybe one of them it doesn't turn out the way you'd hope. It takes a couple practices to get used to a brush. So maybe your first two or three don't turn out that great, but by the fourth one, hey, you've made a really great rose. You never know. So I wasn't too happy with that first one there with that brush, but changing to different brushes too, it's like you have to adapt for that type of brush. So these Velvetouch brushes have a lot more snap to them. They're not as soft. So I'm going to have to apply more pressure for my thicker strokes and have a lighter hand because maybe the point isn't as sharp as that black velvet brush was. So just this is just really great for practicing and figuring out what you like best. Also, you can really tell the difference between different types of bristles in your brushes. So the black velvet is a natural hairbrush, and this Princeton Velvetouch is a synthetic blend. So it's got multiple kinds of synthetic fibers for their bristles. This next one I have is a synthetic squirrel. So while it is synthetic, they're trying to mimic squirrel hair with this one, so it's much softer. One thing I will note with this particular brush is that my point isn't very sharp on it. This is the size 6 Neptune, and so I'm not able to get those really sharp, thin lines in the center like I wanted to, but I'm not really sure. I posted this on Instagram, the photo afterwards, and I wasn't really sure if it's because this brush is older and maybe I didn't take as good a care of it when I first had it, not knowing how to treat my brushes properly when I'm washing them or storing them, so I might have damaged the brush a little bit. But I'll go ahead and revisit this Neptune line of brushes here because I did order several of them this week and they just haven't shipped out yet. I think everything's a little bit slower right now with shipping times, so maybe I'll change my mind on this one and I'll like to use it for flowers in the future. But I didn't like this one as much just because I didn't get that really sharp point, and my personal preference with those is I just really like those the really thin little strokes that I was getting with the previous two brushes. So, but that is why we are practicing and figuring out which ones we like, because when you go to start doing your painting, you don't want to get frustrated by a brush not working out the way you want. And that's a good reason to just do practice things like this and not worry about trying to make a finished cohesive piece. I'm really just practicing one flower over and over until I feel really confident with it. You can really develop your own style by doing this type of a practice drill as well. You could do it with leaves, different types of flowers, any elements that you want to try to find your style or find a brush that you really like using. This is a really good idea for doing that. All right, so this last column, I'm just going to go ahead and use this Dagger brush. I'm still a little not quite sure on how I want to hold the brush all the way, but the video I was watching, she recommended that you hold the brush on its side with the long end toward you, and then you make your strokes just like you would with the round, but with this, you just have to be kind of aware of where the angle on your brush is so that you can make those longer strokes. And I do notice that this particular line of Dagger brushes, the Silver Silk 88s, and they are a synthetic silver tack-on, and they just don't hold as much water as those big round brushes. So you do have to keep reloading it between strokes. Whereas with the round brushes, I pretty much just loaded the brush the first stroke and used it for the entire flower. This one, I'm finding I have to reload my brush 2 to 3 times for each flower because it doesn't hold as much. And that could just be the Dagger. I don't have any large rounds in this line. I just have a 6 and a 1, but they're much smaller than some of the other brushes I have. So I chose to try the Dagger in this line. Of the 4 overall, I will say that this is my least favorite for painting the roses with, and I think that is just because I am not used to the manner in which you need to hold your brush. This might be somebody else's favorite if they're really used to using a dagger for this type of application. I generally just use my daggers for grass textures, for really thin lines in landscape painting. That's pretty much what I've used dagger brushes for. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you notice that I do go to this brush quite a bit for that application, but I haven't used it for loose roses or flowers before. So this was a change. And I'm really curious, if you follow along with this video and you did some practice drills, I would love to hear what your favorite brushes are for doing loose florals, especially roses. What is your go-to brush for doing those? Do you prefer synthetic versus natural hair brushes? What is your favorite? So leave me a comment in the video comments and we can have a little discussion on what your favorite brushes are. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. I'm going to have lots of content and I post at least one video every week. So check it out and make sure you follow me on Instagram as well. You can find me there, Mrs. Hand Painted.